Have you ever stood in the pitch-black woods and wondered how you would survive without your phone or flashlight? For our ancient ancestors, the setting of the sun was the start of a completely different and very dangerous world. The night was not just a time for sleep, but a high-stakes battle for survival against the cold and predators. While we tuck ourselves into soft beds, cavemen had to navigate a landscape filled with shadows and sharp, hungry teeth. It is fascinating to realize that their nightly habits actually shaped the way our own human brains work right now. They were not just primitive brutes, but masters of the dark who used their limited tools to keep life going. To understand how they spent these long hours, we must step back into the flickering glow of the fire. The most important member of any tribe during the long night was the fire, which acted as their living protector. Fire was the only thing standing between a peaceful night and a violent encounter with a massive, hungry cave lion. It provided a circle of safety where the darkness could not reach and the predators were afraid to enter the light. Someone always had to stay awake to feed the flames and watch the horizon for any glowing eyes in the distance. This night watch was a vital job that ensured the survival of every man, woman, and child in the group. If the fire went out, the tribe was essentially blind and defenseless against the many terrors of the prehistoric world. This constant vigil created a deep sense of shared responsibility that bound the early human families together for many generations. While the fire kept them safe, it also turned the cave into a busy workshop for crafting and repairing tools. Nights were the perfect time to sit by the warmth and sharpen stone spearheads or scrape animal hides for clothing. Since hunting happened during the day, the evening hours were dedicated to the maintenance of their very limited survival gear. You would hear the constant clink of stone hitting stone as they practiced the delicate art of flint knapping for hours. This was not a chore, but a social activity where the elders taught the younger members how to survive the wild. The firelight provided just enough visibility to work on the tiny details of a needle or a sharp hunting blade. Every tool made at night was a life-saving investment for the dangerous hunt that would begin at the next sunrise. The night was also the time when the history of the tribe was kept alive through the power of storytelling. Without books or internet, the only way to pass on knowledge was through spoken words and grand, dramatic hand gestures. They would gather around the flames to recount the day's hunt or tell myths about the spirits in the stars. These stories were more than just entertainment. They were a map of the world and a guide for moral behavior. Younger children learned about the dangers of the swamp or the best way to track a wounded bison through stories. This oral tradition turned the dark hours into a classroom where the wisdom of the past was handed down carefully. The shadows dancing on the cave walls became the first movie screens for a people who lived by their imagination. Food was another major part of the nightly routine as the tribe shared the rewards of a successful day's hunt. They did not have individual plates or dinner times, but would gather to roast meat directly over the hot coals. Cooking the meat made it easier to digest and killed off the dangerous bacteria that could make a person sick. The smell of roasting fat would fill the cave and provide a rare moment of comfort in a harsh life. Sharing a meal was a deeply symbolic act that reinforced the strength and unity of the entire hunting group. Even when food was scarce, the act of gathering around the fire created a feeling of abundance and tribal security. This was the original family dinner, where the bonds of human connection were forged in the heat of the fire. When it was finally time to rest, the cavemen did not just lie down on the cold and hard stone. They were actually very resourceful and built comfortable beds out of layers of soft grass, fragrant herbs, and animal furs. Deep research into ancient sites shows that they often chose plants that acted as natural insect repellents to keep bugs away. This kept the lice and biting flies away, so that the tribe could get the deep sleep they desperately needed. They would huddle together for warmth, using their own body heat to survive the freezing temperatures of the Ice Age. This physical closeness was essential for survival and created a powerful sense of intimacy and trust among the tribal members. Their beds were tucked away in the back of the cave where the air was warmer and more protected. The cave walls themselves served as a canvas for their nightly thoughts through the creation of incredible and detailed art. Using charcoal from the fire and crushed minerals, they painted the animals they respected and feared in the deep dark. Some experts believe these paintings were part of a ritual to bring good luck for the next morning's dangerous hunt. Painting in the flickering light made the animals look like they were actually moving and breathing on the stone surface. This was their way of claiming the cave as their own and leaving a mark for future generations to find. The cave art was a deeply spiritual practice that connected the physical world with the mysteries of the spirit realm. It shows that even in the struggle for survival, they felt a powerful need to create something beautiful and lasting. Living in a cave at night meant being constantly aware of the sounds and smells of the environment around them. They had to be able to distinguish between the rustle of the wind and the footstep of a stalking predator. Their senses were much sharper than ours because their lives depended on noticing the smallest change in the nightly rhythm. A sudden silence from the insects or the distant snap of a twig could mean a life or death situation. This state of hyper-awareness meant that they never truly slept as deeply as we do in our modern homes. Even in rest, a part of their brain was always listening for the sound of danger approaching from the dark. This ancient instinct is why many of us still feel a bit uneasy when we hear a strange noise. The stars above were not just distant lights, but a giant calendar that helped them track the changing of the seasons. By watching the patterns in the night sky, they knew when the seasons were shifting and when to move. The moon was their primary clock, telling them how much time they had before the winter snows began to fall. They likely saw the constellations as great hunters or powerful animals that watched over the world from the sky above. This connection to the cosmos gave them a sense of place in a universe that was often very confusing. The night sky was their first map and their first guide to the mystery of the passing of time. They were the original astronomers who looked up and wondered about the great secrets of the dark and the light. Night was also a time for deep spiritual reflection and the practice of early forms of shamanic or religious rituals. The silence and the shadows made the presence of the unseen world feel much closer and more powerful to them. They might use the dark hours to pray to the spirits of the earth for rain or successful hunting trips. These rituals often involved chanting or the rhythmic beating of stones to create a sense of trance and divine connection. The cave was a sacred space where the line between the living and the dead felt very thin and blurry. This was the beginning of human religion, born in the quiet moments between the firelight and the deep, dark night. They sought meaning in the chaos of nature and found it in the stories they told to the spirit world. As the fire slowly died down to glowing embers, the tribe would settle into a light, sleep-to-save energy. The silence of the cave would be filled with the sound of rhythmic breathing and the crackle of the wood. This was the most vulnerable time of the night, when the darkness was at its absolute deepest and most quiet. But even in this state, they were a unit of survival that could spring into action at any moment. The bond they shared was their greatest weapon against a world that was trying to extinguish their small, bright light. They survived the night because they worked together and trusted each other with their very lives in the deep dark. Every sunrise was a victory that proved the strength of the human spirit against the cold and the dark. You are the descendant of these brave people who mastered the night and turned the dark into a home. Every time you sit by a campfire or tell a story, you are repeating an ancient human nightly tradition. Their struggle to stay warm and safe is why we value our homes and our families so much today. The night is no longer as dangerous as it was for them, but the feelings it brings are still deeply rooted within us. We still seek the comfort of the light and the safety of the group when the sun goes down. The legacy of the caveman lives on in the way we dream and the way we watch the stars. Your story is a continuation of theirs, reaching back through the shadows of time to the very first fire. The next time you look at the moon, remember the people who watched it from the mouth of the cave. They were not so different from us, with their hopes and their fears and their love for their families. They carved a life out of the darkness and made sure that the human story would continue to grow. The night was their challenge, and they met it with courage and creativity and the power of the tribe. We owe our existence to the many generations who kept the fire burning through the longest and coldest of nights. Their light still shines in our DNA and in the way we look for meaning in the world. The journey of humanity began in the dark, but it has always been moving toward the bright and beautiful light.